I always believed that family was a fortress solid, unbreakable. A place where love and loyalty shielded us from the world's storms. My home was the heart of that fortress, filled with laughter, Sunday dinners, and the gentle chaos of grandchildren running through the halls. I trusted my children implicitly, never once questioning their intentions. After all, I'd raised them with every ounce of love I had. But sometimes the cracks in a fortress are invisible until someone brave enough points them out. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when my granddaughter, Emma, came to me with eyes too serious for her 12 years. She hesitated at the kitchen table, twisting her fingers, her voice barely above a whisper. "Grandma, my parents are going to take all your money." The words hung in the air, heavy and impossible. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard her. My daughter and son-in-law, the same people I'd helped through every crisis, who called me for advice and brought me flowers on Mother's Day. I tried to laugh it off, but Emma's face was pale, her lips pressed into a thin line. "I heard them talking last night," she insisted, her voice trembling. "They said you're getting older, and it's time to make sure everything goes to them. They don't want you to know." My heart pounded in my chest, a mix of disbelief and dread. Was it possible that the people I loved most were plotting behind my back? I wanted to believe it was a misunderstanding. But as I looked into Emma's earnest eyes, I realized this was the moment everything changed. What I did next would test the very foundation of our family and reveal secrets I never saw coming. Looking back, I can almost convince myself that our family was perfect. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew each other's names, and I tried to recreate that same sense of closeness in my own home. My husband, George, and I built our lives around our two children, Lisa and Mark. We weren't wealthy, but we had enough to keep the lights on, enough to take a summer trip to the lake, enough to fill the house with the smell of fresh bread and the sound of laughter. I was the kind of mother who packed handwritten notes in lunchboxes and lunch boxes, and stayed up late sewing costumes for school plays. George was the steady hand, the quiet strength, the one who taught the kids how to ride their bikes and never missed a single parent-teacher conference. When George passed away 5 years ago, it felt like the sun had set on our little world. The grief was a tidal wave, but Lisa and Mark rallied around me. Lisa, my eldest, was always the responsible, one-organized, practical, the first to call if I needed anything. Mark, younger by 3 years, was the dreamer, the one who'd show up with wildflowers and stories about his latest adventure. I leaned on them more than I ever admitted, grateful for their presence, their help, their love. Lisa married Tom, a man who seemed solid and dependable, if a bit reserved. They had Emma, my only granddaughter, and from the moment she was born, she became the light of my life. Emma was sensitive and observant, with a knack for noticing things others missed. She'd curl up beside me on the couch, asking questions about my childhood or helping me bake cookies, her laughter echoing through the house. Mark, on the other hand, never settled down. He drifted from job to job, relationship to relationship, always promising that the next big thing was just around the corner. I worried about him, but I never stopped believing in his potential. Our family gatherings were loud and joyful, filled with inside jokes and old stories. Birthdays, holidays, even the smallest milestones were celebrated with homemade cakes and too many candles. I loved being the center of it, all the one everyone came to for advice, comfort, or just a listening ear. I prided myself on being fair, generous, and, above all, trusting. Maybe too trusting, but if I'm honest, there were moments, small, fleeting, when I sensed something shifting. Lisa, once so open, had started to keep things from me. She'd brush off my questions about their finances or change the subject when I asked about her work. Tom, always polite, had grown distant, his smiles more forced. Mark's visits became less frequent, and when he did come by, he seemed distracted, preoccupied with his phone or some new scheme. I chalked it up to the busyness of adult life, the natural drift that happens as children grow up and build their own worlds. Still, there were times when I'd catch a look between Lisa and Tom, a whispered conversation that stopped when I entered the room. Once, I overheard Mark on the phone, his voice low and urgent, talking about making sure Mom's taken care of. I wanted to believe it was concern, not calculation. I wanted to believe that the love we'd built over decades was enough to keep us safe from the kind of betrayal I'd only ever seen in movies. And then there was Emma. Sweet, perceptive Emma, who always seemed to know when I needed a hug or a kind word. She was the one constant, the one person who never made me feel like a burden. I never imagined that it would be her, my granddaughter, who would open my eyes to the truth I'd been too afraid to see. It started with little things so small, at first, that I almost convinced myself I was imagining them. Lisa began stopping by more often, but not for the reasons she used to. She'd arrive with a stack of papers or a laptop, her tone brisk and businesslike. "Mom, have you thought about updating your will?" she asked one afternoon, barely. Glancing up from her screen, "It's just smart to have everything in order, in case something happens." She said it with a smile, but there was a tightness around her eyes I hadn't noticed before. I tried to laugh it off. "I'm not planning on going anywhere just yet, Lisa. Besides, everything's already taken care of." But she pressed on, her questions growing more pointed. "Do you remember where you keep your bank statements? Maybe I could help you organize them. It's easy to lose track of things as you get older." The words stung, but I told myself she was just being helpful. After all, she was my daughter. Tom, meanwhile, had started making offhand comments about the house. "It's a big place for one person, Mom," he said one evening as we cleared the dinner table. "Have you ever thought about downsizing? You could move in with us or maybe find a nice retirement community." He tried to make it sound like a suggestion, but I could feel the pressure behind his words. I looked at Emma, who sat quietly at the table, her fork tracing circles in her mashed potatoes. She didn't say anything, but her eyes met mine, and I saw something there, worry, maybe, or fear. Mark's behavior was even more troubling. He'd always been a bit unreliable, but lately he seemed desperate. Called late at night, his voice slurred and anxious. "Mom, I just need a little help, just until I get back on my feet," he pleaded. I'd do the same for you." I sent him money, telling myself it was just a loan, but I knew I'd never see it again. When I asked him to come by for dinner, he made excuses. "I'm busy, Mom, maybe next week." But next week never came. Emma started spending more time with me, often under the guise of helping with chores or homework. One afternoon, as we folded laundry together, she hesitated before speaking. "Grandma, do you trust Mom and Dad?" The question caught me off guard. "Of course I do, sweetheart. Why do you ask?" She shrugged, her eyes fixed on a pair of socks. I hear them talking sometimes. About money. About you." Her voice was so small, so uncertain, that I felt a pang of guilt for not noticing sooner. The tension in the house grew thicker with each passing day. Lisa began bringing up power of attorney, suggesting it would make things easier for everyone. Tom started dropping by unannounced, checking the mail or peeking into the garage. Mark's calls became more frantic, his requests for money more frequent. I felt like I was being watched, evaluated, as if my own children were circling, waiting for me to make a mistake. One evening, after everyone had left, I found Emma sitting on the porch steps, her knees pulled to her chest. She looked up at me, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I don't want you to leave, Grandma," she whispered. "I don't want them to make you do something you don't want to do." I sat beside her, wrapping my arm around her shoulders. "I'm not going anywhere, Emma. I promise." But even as I said the words, I felt a chill run through me. For the first time, I wondered if I was truly safe in my own home. The next day, Lisa arrived with a folder full of documents. "Just sign here, Mom," she said, her voice too bright. "It's just a formality." I hesitated, pen in hand, my heart pounding. Emma hovered in the doorway, her face pale. I looked at my daughter, at the woman I'd raised, and for the first time I saw a stranger. The trust I'd always taken for granted was slipping away, replaced by a gnawing sense of betrayal. I didn't sign the papers that day. Instead, I told Lisa I needed time to think. She smiled, but her eyes were cold. As she left, Emma squeezed my hand, her small fingers trembling. "I'm here, Grandma," she whispered. "I'll help you." And in that moment, I realized I wasn't alone, but I was at the edge of something I couldn't ignore any longer. The night it all came to a head. The house was unusually quiet. I'd just finished washing the dinner dishes. The hum of the dishwasher the only sound in the kitchen. Emma had stayed behind after Lisa and Tom left, saying she wanted to help me tidy up. I could tell something was weighing on her. She kept glancing at the clock, her hands fidgeting with the hem of her sweater. I tried to lighten the mood, telling her stories about when her mother was her age, but she barely smiled. Finally, as I wiped down the counter, Emma spoke. Her voice was so soft I almost missed it. "Grandma, can I tell you something? But you have to promise not to get mad at me." I set the dish towel aside and knelt down so we were eye to eye. "You can tell me anything, sweetheart. I promise." She took a shaky breath, her eyes darting to the window as if she was afraid someone might overhear. "Last night I heard Mom and Dad talking in their room. Wasn't trying to listen. But I couldn't sleep and their voices woke me up." She paused, twisting her fingers together. "They were talking about you. About your money. Mom said you're getting older and it's time to make sure everything goes to them. Dad said they should get you to sign some papers soon, before you get confused or forgetful." Emma's voice broke on the last word, and I felt my heart crack open. I wanted to tell her she was mistaken, that she must have misunderstood. But deep down, I knew she was telling the truth. The little things, the pressure to sign documents, the sudden interest in my finances. The way Lisa and Tom had started treating me like a burden instead of a mother suddenly made sense. I felt a wave of nausea, a cold realization settling. "In my bones, did they say anything else?" I asked, my voice barely steady. Emma nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Mom said if you don't agree, they'll have to step in and make decisions for you. Dad said it's for your own good. But I don't think it is, Grandma. I think they just want your money." She looked at me, her eyes pleading. "I don't want them to hurt you. I don't want you to lose your house or your things. Love. You." I pulled her into my arms, holding her tight as she sobbed. My mind raced, torn between disbelief and anger. How could my own daughter, my flesh and blood, plot against me like this? How long had they been planning? And what about Mark? Was he involved? Or was he just another pawn in their scheme? As I held Emma, I realized I couldn't ignore the truth any longer. I'd spent my whole life believing the best in my children, trusting that love would be enough to keep us together. But love, I was learning, could be twisted by fear, greed, and desperation. I had to protect myself and Emma from whatever came next. When Emma's tears finally slowed, I wiped her cheeks and looked her in the eye. "Thank you for telling me, sweetheart. You're so brave. I'm going to take care of this, I promise. Kai, but I need you to keep this between us for now, okay?" She nodded, her face solemn. "I won't say anything. I just want you to be safe." Night after Emma went home, I sat alone in the living room, the weight of her words pressing down on me. I replayed every conversation, every suspicious glance, every moment I'd brushed aside as harmless. The betrayal stung, but beneath it, a new feeling began to grow resolve. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't senile or confused. I was still the woman who'd built this family from the ground up, and I wasn't about to let anyone, especially my own children, take that away from me. I knew confronting Lisa and Tom would change everything. There would be anger, denial, maybe even threats, but I also knew I couldn't stay silent. I had to make a plan to protect what was mine and to show Emma and myself that I was stronger than they thought. What I didn't know was just how far my family would go once I started fighting back. The next morning, I woke with a heaviness in my chest that I couldn't shake. I moved through my usual routine, making coffee, feeding the birds outside the kitchen window, but everything felt different, as if the world had shifted overnight. I kept replaying Emma's words, the fear in her voice, the betrayal in her story. I knew I couldn't wait any longer. I had to confront Lisa and Tom, no matter how much it hurt. I called Lisa and asked her to come over, telling her I needed to talk. She arrived within the hour, Tom trailing behind her, both of them wearing carefully neutral expressions. I could see the tension in Lisa's jaw, the way Tom avoided my eyes. I invited them to sit at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd shared so many family meals, and for a moment I almost lost my nerve. But then I remembered Emma's trembling hands, her whispered plea for help, and I found my resolve. "I know what you've been planning," I said quietly, my voice steady, despite the storm inside me. Emma heard you talking last night. She told me everything. The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Lisa's face went pale, her mouth opening and closing as she searched for a response. Tom's eyes narrowed, his lips pressed into a thin line for a moment. No one spoke. Then Lisa found her voice brittle and defensive. Mom, you're confused. Emma must have misunderstood. We're just talking about making sure you're taken care of. That's all. Stick my head, refusing to let her deflect. Don't lie to me, Lisa. I've seen the way you've been acting. The papers, the questions about my will, the talk about moving me out of my own home. I may be getting older, but I'm not blind or stupid. Tom leaned forward, his tone suddenly sharp. We're just trying to help, Mom. You're alone now, and it's a lot to manage. We thought it would be easier if we handled things for you. You should be grateful. We care enough to step in. The words stung more than I expected. Grateful for being manipulated, for being treated like a burden. I felt my heart break harden into something else in Gar, maybe, or self-respect. If you really cared, you would have talked to me, not about me. You would have asked what I wanted, instead of making plans behind my back. Lisa's eyes filled with tears, but I saw the frustration there too. You don't understand, Mom? It's not easy for us either. We have our own bills, our own worries. We just thought. She stopped herself, biting her lip. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not the little girl I'd raised, but a woman cornered by her own choices. I felt a wave of sadness, deeper than anger, deeper than betrayal. I know life is hard, Lisa, but that doesn't give you the right to take what isn't yours. I trusted you. Tom stood up abruptly, pushing his chair back. This is ridiculous. If you don't want our help, fine. But don't come crying to us when you can't handle things on your own. He stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Lisa stayed, her shoulders slumped, tears streaming down her face. Sorry, Mom. I didn't know what else to do. We're drowning. And I thought maybe. She broke off, sobbing. I reached across the table, my own tears falling. I would have helped you, Lisa. All you had to do was ask. But you tried to take from me instead. That's not how family works. She nodded, wiping her eyes. But I could see the wall between us, now something broken that couldn't be easily fixed. When she finally left, I sat alone in the quiet house, the echoes of our argument ringing in my ears. The heartbreak was overwhelming, but beneath it I felt a strange sense of relief. The truth was out. There was no more pretending, no more hiding. I knew where I stood, and I knew what I had to do next. But as I looked around the empty kitchen, I wondered if my family would ever be whole again, if this was the price of finally standing up for myself. After Lisa left, the house felt emptier than ever. I wandered from room to room, touching the framed photos on the walls, the souvenirs from family vacations, the little reminders of a life I'd built with so much care. For a while, I let myself grieve, not just for the trust that had been broken, but for the version of my family I thought I knew. But grief, I realized, could only hold me for so long. I had to do something not just for myself, but for Emma, who had risked so much to tell me the truth. The next afternoon, Emma came over after school. She found me in the garden, pulling weeds with more force than necessary. She sat beside me, silent for a moment, then slipped her small hand into mine. Are you okay, Grandma? She asked, her voice gentle. I squeezed her hand, feeling a surge of gratitude for her courage. I will be, sweetheart, but I need your help. We're going to make a plan together. Her eyes widened, a mix of fear and hope flickering across her face. What kind of plan? I explained, as simply as I could, that I needed to protect myself and my home. Sometimes even people we love make mistakes, I told her, but that doesn't mean we let them hurt us. I'm going to talk to someone who knows about these things, a lawyer. And I'm going to make sure no one can take what's mine without my say-so. Emma nodded, her face set with determination. I'll help you. I can write down anything you need or tell you if I hear them talking again. Her loyalty gave me strength. For the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of hope. Asterisk. The next morning, I called an old friend from church, Margaret, who had gone through something similar with her own family. She listened quietly as I told her everything, then gave me the number of a lawyer she trusted. You're doing the right thing, Margaret said. It's not easy, but you have to protect yourself, and you're not alone. Sitting in the lawyer's office a few days later, I felt nervous but resolute. I explained my situation, every detail, every suspicion. The lawyer listened carefully, then outlined my options. Update my will, set up a trust, assign power of attorney to someone I truly trusted. You have more control than you think, she assured me. But you have to act now, before anyone else tries to make decisions for you. I left her office with a folder full of documents and a new sense of purpose. That evening, I sat with Emma at the kitchen table, filling out forms and making lists. We talked about boundaries, what I would and wouldn't allow, who could visit, what information I would share. It felt strange drawing lines with my own children, but I knew it was necessary as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. I looked at Emma and smiled. We're going to be okay, I told her. No matter what happens next, we're going to get through this together. But even as I said it, I couldn't help but wonder how would Lisa and Tom react when they realized I'd taken back control. Would Mark understand, or would he see it as another betrayal? I didn't know what the future held, but I was finally ready to face it, no matter the cost. And I had a feeling the real test of our family was still to come. The days that followed were a whirlwind of paperwork, phone calls, and difficult conversations. With the lawyer's help, I updated my will and set up a trust that would ensure my wishes were honored, no matter what anyone else wanted. I gave power of attorney to Margaret, someone I knew would act in my best interest, and I made sure all my important documents were secure. Each step felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I hadn't realized I'd lost. Word of my decision spread quickly. Lisa called first, her voice tight and wounded. "Why didn't you tell me you were doing all this?" she demanded. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "It's because I needed to protect myself, Lisa. I love you, but I can't ignore what's happened. I hope one day you'll understand." There was a long silence on the other end. Then a quiet, "I'm sorry, Mom." I could hear the pain in her voice, but also a hint of relief. Maybe she was tired of carrying the weight of her own choices. Tom didn't call. Instead, he sent a curt email asking for details about the trust and what it meant for their future. I replied simply, explaining that my decisions were final and that I hoped we could move forward with honesty. I didn't expect a reply, and I didn't get one. Mark's reaction surprised me most. He showed up at my door one evening, looking older and more tired than I'd ever seen him. "I heard what happened," he said, his voice rough. "Sorry, Mom, I should have been here for you." We sat together on the porch, watching the sun dip below the trees. For the first time in years, he didn't ask for anything. Instead, he listened as I explained what I'd done and why. "I get it," he said quietly. "You have to look out for yourself. I'm proud of you." His words brought tears to my eyes, a small piece of healing in the midst of so much hurt. Emma, my sweet Emma, became my confidant and my anchor. We spent more time together than ever, baking, gardening, and talking about everything and nothing. She seemed lighter, too, as if the burden she'd carried had finally been lifted. I made sure she knew how grateful I was for her honesty and her love. "You saved me, Emma," I told her one afternoon as we watched the birds at the feeder. "You reminded me that it's never too late to stand up for yourself." Family gatherings changed. They were smaller, quieter, sometimes awkward. There were no more whispered conversations behind closed doors. No more pressure to sign papers or make decisions I didn't understand. The trust I'd once taken for granted was gone, replaced by something more fragile but also more honest. I missed the easy closeness we'd once shared. But I didn't miss the uncertainty or the fear. I learned that setting boundaries doesn't mean shutting people out. It means protecting what matters most. Some relationships healed slowly and painfully. Others faded, leaving space for new beginnings. I found strength I didn't know I had, and I discovered that even in the face of betrayal, love could survive changed but still present as I looked around my home, filled with memories and hope. I knew I'd done the right thing. The cost was real, but so was the freedom. I was no longer just a mother or a grandmother. I was the keeper of my own story, and I was finally writing it on my own terms. Looking back, I realize how easy it is to lose yourself in the roles you play for others: mother, grandmother, caretaker, peacemaker. For so long, I believed that loving my family meant trusting them without question, sacrificing my own needs for theirs, and turning a blind eye to the warning signs that something wasn't right. But love, I've learned, is not about blind faith. It's about honesty, respect, and the courage to protect yourself, even when it means making hard choices. I never imagined I'd have to set boundaries with my own children, or that the person who would help me find my voice again would be my granddaughter. Emma taught me that sometimes the youngest among us see the truth most clearly, and that listening to your instincts, no matter how uncomfortable, is an act of self-respect. I'm proud of the woman I've become, not because I avoided pain, but because I faced it head-on and refused to let it define me. If you're reading this and you feel that something is off in your own family, trust yourself. Don't wait for things to get worse before you take action. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary. You deserve to feel safe, respected, and in control of your own life, no matter your age or your circumstances. And if you're lucky enough to have someone like Emma in your corner, hold on to them tightly. Sometimes, the people who love us most are the ones who help us see what we've been missing all along. This experience changed me, but it didn't break me. I'm still here, still standing, and still believing in the power of family, just with my eyes a little wider and my heart a little stronger. If you think my story is over, think again. Life has a way of surprising us, and I have a feeling there are more lessons, more challenges, and more moments of unexpected grace ahead. Stay with me, because what happened next? Well, that's a story for another day.